Hi, everybody. It's Lew Dennen from EOXS. This is Stories on Steel. It's our podcast. And today we have Joey Macourek. We're going to have a conversation a little bit about Joey and his sort of career in the business and his interest in the business and things that sort of got him going in the business and kind of where he is on his journey. And of course, the goal is to give you, the listener, something different to listen to, not just the kind of nuts and bolts of the business, but real life human beings like us, and just a conversation. So hopefully you dig it. So Joey, welcome. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me this morning.
Indeed. So one of the first things, so you are, I'm saying it wrong, I hope I say it right, the Vice President of Finance of PSI Power and Controls?
Exactly right, yeah. It's
Right.
a senior finance accounting leadership position. We don't have formally a CFO, but I mean, de facto, that's me.
What, just for intro, what does the company do?
We make power control solutions. So think with two different product lines. One is ACS, that's automated control system. So you're thinking control panels, kind of industrial ones that you might see on the side of a building or perhaps on a large piece of equipment.
Gotcha.
And then emergency power, which you're talking connectors between utility power and generators, I suppose. So think automated transfer switches for like a data center or perhaps a hospital.
Okay.
You know, when power goes out in those facilities from utility, that facility cannot shut down. Data center, it creates a lot of issues, and a hospital needs to operate at all times anyway, right? So when utility power cuts off, our product would switch that from utility to like a generator,
Right.
and just keep things going. Also like generator tap boxes, amongst a bunch of other products that I'm not nearly smart enough to explain.
But this sounds like needed currently in our current weather environments.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. It becomes even more needed as like we switch to more renewable energies, for sure.
I got you. I know that also on your journey, it also says you were also at a company, director of finance for a company called, I want to say this wrong, Loftus Steel and Aluminum?
I was, yeah. Yeah, and it was an interesting story in landing there. But I mean, it was a steel metal fabrication shop. I mean, I think about 80% of the business we did out of there was aluminum. But the idea of that business is like we were just, acquiring material from mills, whether it was steel, aluminum, small gauge, or like plates, rounds, what have you. Cutting them in a variety of ways, either with saws, plasma table, laser, shear, fiber laser, water jet. I mean, we had all those, but we weren't further fabricating. Like we didn't weld and we didn't bend. A lot of our customers there were fab shops themselves. So it was almost like a deal where you'd be competing with your customers in a way.
Oh, yeah. I've been at companies like that. I know exactly what that's like.
Yeah, but I mean, it was a really cool business to be a part of. Yeah, I did an acquisition in the midst of me being there, and I was even their auditor prior to getting to work there. So I got pretty intimate with the business even before I started.
Well, no, your background, if I'm right, you're a CPA.
Exactly right. Yeah. So I worked in public accounting for, gosh, I don't know how many years, out of college, and even I interned, did private accounting, public accounting, taxes, audit, worked at like Cummins, the diesel manufacturer, for a little bit when I was in school too. So just got a host of information when I was in college. Yeah, bunch of internships, 5 internships.
So I can send you my books.
Yeah.
Hey, man.
Yeah, you could. I mean, I could help where I can. I wouldn't say that I'm particularly a tax expert. I defer to like our tax accountants on that,
Sure.
but I like to think I'm pretty good at operational finance.
I appreciate that. I must ask, how did you look a little bit, just a few gray hairs younger than me, just a few. And, one of the interesting things that I think people out there talk about at least in our industry, I'm sure maybe other industries, but certainly in the let's call it metals manufacturing industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's how do you get the younger generation, whatever the younger generation is defined as anymore, interested in at least looking at the industry? And I know that I've talked to enough people who seemingly talk about that a lot. And I'm wondering, what got you interested in the industry? Because you're also, if you don't mind, you're a president of the Young Professional Leadership Committee, which tells me that you've got your finger on the pulse of this stuff, and you're also a leader. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's kind of a thing where I've been a leader my whole life, and not by choice a lot of times, but I think really being engaged, listening, and participating, and I have some source of charisma. I think that typically places me in a lot of leadership positions that maybe I should or shouldn't be in, but it happens anyway. And I'd say that I'm like a spokesperson for young people, but I mean, I came into the industry just having an interest in manufacturing. Always been interested in manufacturing. So like, I'm from Knoxville. When I moved to Nashville is like a healthcare capital in the United States, right? A lot of healthcare companies are headquartered there. HCA's there, United is there. Most of the insurance companies are there as well. So the audit practice that I did work at, I was with the largest regional firm in the state, LBMC, and a lot of their practice was healthcare.
Okay.
But like, I do not gravitate to that. It's hard for me because it's like you're working on companies who, help solve cancer, like urology.
Right.
But their KPIs are like bed turnover, and it's really hard for me to get, it's hard for me to get into that. I'm much into like widgets. So like me and my buddies in college, we would watch like How It's Made, the show, where they have like, you see that one, right?
Of course. I was like, that's pretty cool.
We were obsessed. And so like the first two, they always have 3 segments. The first 2 are kind of lame. And then the last one, they're like, and now we're going to make airplane wings. And you go, oh shit. Like I got to stay and watch it. And then they keep doing it. We would sit there for hours and just get locked into it. But manufacturing was always something I gravitated to. I love being on the shop floor if they'll let me. So just to even be a part of it is just really cool. But I think, I don't know, that may just be me.
No, I think that's incredibly cool. Look, that's something, I grew up in the business and I was always on the shop floor, and I've got some weird affinity for wanting to be out there and hearing the machines and seeing the stuff go. But I kind of always did. And it's really cool to hear that perhaps somebody from the younger generation totally digs that. Like, that's what gets you interested versus, you being a CPA. You would think some of those companies in Nashville would be right up your alley. Like, this is numbers and crunching and all. No, manufacturing that got you interesting, which is a whole different, I can't think
industry, really.
Yeah. But did you do stuff like that? Like, were you building stuff in high school? Was that kind of stuff you did with your, were you like making stuff?
No, you'd be really disappointed to see my hands. I mean, they only have calluses from lifting weights. Seriously. I mean, I lift every day, but I couldn't make anything, which is why I have such admiration for the folks that we do have that can do that stuff.
Got it.
It's just made, I mean, seeing something from come from nothing, sourcing materials, seeing all the intricate parts of a business come together, and then have a widget being made, whether it's, transfer switch or, I mean, even at the fab shop, it was like, we would make signs. Like, companies would send in, they'd say, hey, we need this in, whatever gauge, and we would just throw it on the laser. Our CAD team would design it, and it would cut it out into like a beautiful sign that obviously had burrs and stuff. But then you could go see our work, on buildings, which is like the coolest thing ever. Because I would see it, like, I'd be paying the bills for the metal that we're buying. Mm-hmm. I would like be a part of purchasing a laser, and then we would see it come through, and that was super cool. And we would even sell stuff to like the utility companies, right? So like when they cut a big hole in the road base,
right,
to help whatever to get underneath it and address pipes or whatever, utilities, like we would sell them a large piece of steel or whatever to put over that while they were working on the hole. So it's I don't know, manufacturing I just think is like the coolest stuff ever. And even learning how like mills work, how like ore is melted and poured into like, the slabs, or how things are rolled, like all that stuff is just awesome because you can just see it come through the pipeline. So even in our business here, like we've got a supplier who makes the cabinets that we use for, whatever. And I got to go like visit their shop, obviously, and I knew about their punches. I knew about the laser. I knew about the press brakes they use. I knew about powder coating, all because I'd been to a million facilities at this point. So it's just cool to be kind of a cog in the wheel, honestly.
This is fascinating because the stories that I hear from people in the industry, again, particularly relating to the youth, is that they're not interested. You've kind of blown that out of the water in about 10 minutes.
Oh man, well, I would say this.
You know so much about it that you're like, even as an accountant, you're ripping information that salespeople know, that buyers know. This is incredible.
Well, I think you kind of have to. I mean, I don't know how you are an effective CFO or financial leader if you don't understand the business that you're working in. Like, you got to understand the people, got to understand the supply chain, got to understand like the challenges that workers are facing and the industry's facing, whether it's, and I mean, in metal fab, like it was all commodity driven anyway. So like during COVID, you couldn't get stuff from overseas. You couldn't get metal from Russia. And if you did, your lead time from, 20 weeks became 50 weeks or 70 weeks. And so it's like, I don't know, pricing is like challenging. I mean, it's a whole animal. But I will tell you about this because this is actually really cool. I think you'll find some interest in it. But after I left that steel fab shop, I got a chance to work at a private equity firm, LFM Capital in Nashville. Okay. It's called Leaders for Manufacturing. It's like a spinoff of a dual program they had at MIT for, it was like where you get a master's in engineering and your MBA. And so a lot of the partners and like people that came out of that program work at LFM Capital now, but they exclusively buy manufacturing companies, which is why I'm here in the first place. But so they only work with manufacturing.
Wait, so I gotta ask. So you, when I brought up Loftus Steel, you kind of said there was a story of how you kind of got there.
Yeah.
It just popped into my head. That's part of the cool thing of the podcast. Tell us your stories. How did that kind of come about?
Yeah, so I can start back in college if you like. If that's helpful.
You got it.
Yeah, so like I'm from Knoxville, and it's an okay place to grow up. Like it's very suburban and all centered around the University of Tennessee, which is cool. But I needed to get out of there and go somewhere that was close, but that would allow me to like grow in business, right? And so I wanted to live in the city I wanted to go to school in the city that I was going to work in. So Nashville was an obvious relocation for me. Okay. And so I went to Belmont University there, and they had what they told us when we went through orientation was they had more internships than students to fill them, and I was like, say less. So I just immediately signed up, went and did like 5 internships when I was in school, which is kind of unheard of. Most people do like 1 or 2, maybe. But I tried to be really active both in my internships and in other social clubs during school, which was helpful. So I started at a CPA firm doing audit, moved over to LBMC, that big regional firm that I mentioned previously. And they obviously had a big healthcare practice, but I was kind of adamant that I work in manufacturing and preferably private equity, because that's the kind of stuff that interests me. Like if you can it's because at that point it's all about improvement. It's all about improving your productivity, improving how much revenue you get in, improving your EBITDA. I mean, you name it, that's what you're trying to do, and then ultimately sell the business after a series of years. So I got really blessed, and I did get into that practice. I did work with a lot of manufacturers, including Loftus. But I also got to work with some of the companies that LFM owns now. Like they own Heartland Steel in Michigan that makes like racking systems, both custom and kind of standard racks for warehousing. Okay. They also make like mezzanines and stuff like that. Anything that you would see in a warehouse, they would make. Wow. And so, it was just kind of right up my alley, all this stuff that I saw and learned. I was like, man, I really want to do that. And if I ever got the chance to work at LFM, like, I'm going to do it. Okay. So during the pandemic, like auditing became really, really hard for me because it took away everything I liked about the job. It took away me getting to be on the shop floor and engage with my coworkers, any peers. I wasn't learning about the business. I was just kind of working from home, checking boxes and trying to do audit work papers, and that's like not me. I mean, that turned me into like an A+, from an A+ kind of employee to like maybe a C. I was depressed and pretty horrific. But there was an opportunity to go work at Loftus. I had known the CEO there, and he said there was an opening, so I went over there, and it was kind of a perfect fit. And after a period of time, like 2 years working there was an opportunity to go work at LFM, and I was not gonna pass on that for anything. So I got to work in it was a dream, and it still is. I honestly pinch myself every day here. So I worked at LFM in kind of like an internal consulting role, where if companies did an acquisition or they had trouble, getting through an audit or whatever, they would send me out there and I'd get to go like help on a variety of projects, which is right up my alley. But then there was an opportunity to come, work at PSI. Their finance leader had left, and there was a vacancy there, and I had filled in for him for a little bit. The company liked me. I loved being here. So within a series of months, right? So last September, I started working at LFM. in December, I got married to my wife. We've been dating for 7 years, so got married. And then in February, early March, we moved out to Charlotte. So like that's where we live now. So it's been just kind of a wild, I don't know, last 12 months for sure.
An adventure.
Oh yeah, it's been a journey.
I think one of the biggest things I just picked up on, I assume some of the listeners did too, is there's a huge push, obviously, for remote. Everybody wants to stay remote. And you get sort of the higher line folks saying we need people back in the office. You're so unique, and like I said, the fact that you're, like I said, I'd say a bit more the younger generation. Please take that with all the right way that it's meant to be said. You're actually a person saying, no, I need to be in the office. I need to be on the floor. I need to be around people. And I think that's something that has been missing for 4 or 5 years, is that many of us have gotten used to sitting in our house in our shorts doing our work, but we forget to connect. And even when I go on the road now and see people, it's a blessing to say, hi, there's a human there. Mm-hmm. And it's cool that's something that you just picked up on immediately and said you went from an A+ to a C person.
Yeah, I became very mediocre very fast. I mean, it took away everything that I liked about working. Like, I'm really blessed here. We've got an awesome leadership team. Like our supply chain guy has been doing supply chain since 1994.
Okay.
And that has been my entire life. So like I was born in 94. He's been doing it the whole time. And so like I get to sit next to and learn from that guy. Like our general manager is, he's went to MIT. I mean, that guy's a genius. And I get to be around people like that and, learn on the shop floor. I've got an awesome team around me. It's like, how am I gonna get better if I'm not engaging, with people that are here? And I'm not opposed to working from home. Like, I'll do that sometimes if there's something I really, really need to do.
Right.
And I need no distractions. I'll just, especially if it's preparing a board presentation or something like that, like I'll just go home and shut the door and work at home and where no one's bothering me. But otherwise, like I should be here. I mean, if the shop employees should be here, then like I should be here too, because I'm part of the team. We're doing it together. Joey,
I'm not kidding when I say I bow humbly. It's incredibly refreshing to. I didn't quite know this is where the conversation was going to go, but wow, this is what would you maybe advise? How about there? Here's a great question. For all the people that might be listening to the show, especially people my age and older, who are working on how do you attract youth to come into our industry, regardless of what part of the industry, metals is a broad industry.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think they might go about attracting people like you to, versus let's go own Facebook or whatever, how do you get people to realize this is a great industry and there are great jobs in it and you can really earn a solid living? What would your advice to those folks be?
I think it depends on what their goals as an organization are and the kind of people they're trying to get to, right? Like, I mean, we have like over $1 trillion in student debt, like as a country. I mean, you could obviously offer incentives to say, hey, if you stay here for a period of time, we'll pay off a certain portion of your debt, but it's contingent on you being in the office. So, I mean, incentives could do it, pay could do it, but I would also consider what kind of positions you want to be in the office. Like, do you really need an IT person to be in the office? Like, probably not. Like, do you need a data person to be in the office? Maybe not, but if you're on the shop floor, like obviously you got to be there. If you're internal sales, like, yeah, you should probably be in the office so you can interact with like your outside salespeople and your people on the shop floor. And if you're in accounting, like you should definitely be there. Otherwise, how do you know what's going on? Like in the business, how do you engage? How do you stay plugged in? So in terms of attracting people, I'm not sure. Back when I did work at Loftus, we had an inside rep who had previously worked at Ryerson, and now like she works at Olympic. And from what she was saying, there's not a lot of women in metals, but I know there's like support groups for that, and there's just not a lot of youth in metals anyway. But I don't know how you solve that. I mean, there's like a crisis of young men in America right now anyway, where a lot of people are just like disengaged. There's been books written about it recently, of which I can't reference because I don't remember, but I don't know. I think we're just facing challenging times in general, and as a general statement, I think you just incentivize the behavior that you want. So if what you want is smart people, but they're saddled with student debt, maybe incentivize them with that.
That's a hell of an idea. I don't think I've actually heard that resolution. That's a great idea.
Yeah, I made it up. And on the student debt stuff too, I don't even think you got to forgive it. If you're the government, I think you just absolve people of interest and then make everyone's rate like 2% or something that's like really affordable instead of like these really pervasive kind of aggressive like 7% rates. Because I don't know how people overcome that. Yes, people should pay the money back, but how are they gonna if they can't?
Those of us with kids in college, and I'm one of them, we're all dealing with that very question. We know damn well they're going to come out, they're going to have some debt, we know it. And what you just said was fascinating, because it never occurred to me to say, you know what, you really ought to go look for a job that incentivizes you in this way. I think that's a great idea. And I think, it's an interesting, about a month ago, or I was at a conference in Atlanta where there were 1,400 steel people. What you described, walking around the room, is what I saw. I'm not sure there were people under 30 there. I think the mid-range was probably me. I'm 55. I think that was probably the middle range of the room. And you're also right. There weren't as many women. I don't know why it's the industry that we're in, but the question, right, like I was asking, I'm glad you brought it up, is how do you attract that? How do you get people to want to be in this industry? Because it's not going to grow, right?
No.
People really like yourself who are that have that much foresight to say this is what it takes.
Yeah, I think it's challenging. And on the women topic too, it's one of those things I wouldn't say a lot of women would even be interested in. I think it's a similar conversation with, people who bring up there's not a lot of women in engineering. It's because a lot of women don't want to be engineers. A lot of women want to be nurses or, you name it, not to say that they shouldn't be engineers, but and the women I've talked to and I've engaged with, a lot of women want to be like lawyers or nurses or want to work in like finance. But engineering is something that appeals to a lot of men, and I don't know that that's the same for metals, but I would think so. It's a dirty industry in nature.
Yeah,
and it's challenging, and it's been dominated by men for hundreds of years.
Since
if it right, and if it's going to change, it's going to change over time, right? It's not going to be night and day, but
I appreciate your point, which is it's probably a place to look.
Yeah.
What do you think about something that I'm seeing a lot of? Obviously, it's not just Chat GPT, because that's sort of the general term, right? But AI. What do you think about does your company currently utilize it, and if so, how? And then also, what do you think about it?
Yeah, we are in kind of a weird space where we only have like 90 employees in general. We're doing okay from like a financial perspective, but we don't have a lot of bandwidth, especially from like technology or like even at our leadership team. We don't have a ton of depth. And so it's hard to kind of adopt things like that. I think it's got a lot of utility, certainly in the future, but I think you got to have a lot of sophistication to leverage it beyond just asking it questions at this point. I think, technology will, continue to progress, and maybe there will be opportunities for companies our size to leverage it in the future. But right now, we've got enough problems just trying to get through the day a lot of times. We're trying to offload a lot of our more manual work, like sales taxes, for example, trying to leverage technology for that. And AI is interesting as a topic, but to me, I wait for applicability on this stuff. There's always that thing, and I can't remember what it is in like marketing, where it's like you could be an early adopter, you could be like a lagger, you could be someone who's trying to stay up on technology. And to me, like with stuff like that, I'm interested, and I read about it every day in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. But if I can't leverage it in my business, then it's something that I'm just keeping in the back of my mind until I can.
Do you sense that is there any kind of push? I'm not saying push is the right word. Any kind of, let's call it the word push from the upper management to say, folks, we need to begin to adopt this. We need to think about adopting it. Again, I say Chat GPT because that's the first thing that comes to my mind when I hear AI. I'm not thinking necessarily robotics as much as I'm thinking, this new thing that's going to take all of our jobs. And I'm not necessarily even sure I see that, but I certainly see it helping. And I'm wondering if you're sensing that as well, or you have a different perspective than I do.
I don't know. I feel like at this point, it's more, people call it AI, but I think it's just algorithmic. At least in applicability right now. If we were going to use it at all, I would think about like our supply chain, right? Or maybe our inventory usage. Maybe we could use it to better calculate and predict like how much inventory we need to be on hand. What does our safety stock need to be? What are our burn rates going to be? maybe I could use it to help calculate like labor rates. But beyond that, I'm not sure how, like we as like a mid-sized business would leverage it. And I haven't heard that in the private equity space either. I think it's like just I mean, as a technology, it's still relatively new. And so to the extent that it becomes applicable in like mid-sized businesses is tough. I mean, it's like the same thing that happened like 20 years ago with robotics, right? Like everyone was interested. Everyone said this is going to take our jobs. And maybe at like Amazon, that could be true, or Dell, or like a huge public company. But to the extent that that's going to trickle down to small businesses and mid-sized businesses, I'm not particularly optimistic, because the cost is still going to remain extremely high, and you got to be sophisticated to use it. So until a company like dumbs it down enough to make it so like me, as like someone who doesn't, code software,
Right.
to use it, I'm just not particularly bullish right now. But that's not to say that it won't become something we could use in the next 20 years.
Fascinating. So it's not something you use on a daily basis for your job in any way, shape, or no. Cool. All right, that's interesting for people to hear, because that's so much in the news, and all the little posts that come out. You must look at the new AI or look at the new app or whatever, and you try, you're like, okay, I see it, but how is this going to help? And I'm hearing that discussion going on a lot. What is you're currently doing these various things, but I'm hearing you, and you sound like you have a vision for yourself. Where do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years?
I think it's hard to say. I mean, hopefully LFM lets me stick around and they're like happy with my performance. So if it's not at this company, maybe it's at a different LFM portfolio company. I mean, really, I would still like to be happily married, would make me happy. So to balance both my career aspirations and that would be nice. I would like I'd like to have a child potentially. And long term, I want to get good enough at business that people might seek my advice and want me to serve on their boards. So I was serving on, a board of directors for a credit union. We just crossed over $500 million in assets before I moved. Yeah, before I moved, they kind of booted me into like an advisory role when I couldn't attend the meetings anymore. It's in Nashville, which is fair.
Right.
But I was doing that. I served on a couple not-for-profit boards in Nashville, but ultimately I'd like to be in some paid board positions in the latter part of my career.
Okay.
There was a business leader we lost in Nashville this last year. I wish I could remember his name, but I mean, he went to MTSU and he was kind of just a pillar in the community. But that's what he did. I mean, he sold a business called Zycron. It was a technology company, and subsequent to that, he just served the community and served on a bunch of boards and was just active, but wasn't like running a business anymore. And so if I could ever get in that kind of position, that'd be nice. And if I could like own my cars and stuff, like that'd be cool.
I'll tell you what, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. I know it's a podcast, but it's still a conversation between two humans. I'm inspired. I mean, I gotta admit, I'm inspired that there are youth out there. I keep calling you youthful. I'm sorry. When I was that age, and I would say, look, people at older, I apologize. It's just me. But it's inspiring to hear people like you talk about things like this and your future, and in such a positive way that it gives me a hell of a lot of hope that we are in good shape. And I'm quite serious when I say that to you.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, that's really kind, especially I haven't known you very long, so.
Well, I'm just listening to you. Anybody who watches this or listens to this can hear and listen and go, would that old guy quit talking? Let the young guy talk.
I don't know that I'm that interesting, but I mean, sometimes I worry that I set the bar too low, but I'm just trying to focus on kind of, what's in front of me.
I don't think that's your problem, man. I don't think setting the bar too low is an issue you have. This is fascinating. Is there anything else you might want to share? And I'll just be quiet.
I don't know if you could guide me. That'd be helpful. I don't really know what to talk about. I've never kind of had a soapbox before.
No, this is. I mean, well, so let's ask this. If you right now at in your position, suddenly somebody said, "Here's some money. Go create your own business." What would you create?
Oh, I'd make a warehousing business all day long. I would just go buy a warehouse, put up some racks, and get some really trained forklift operators, because it's got like really low overhead. I mean, you're just running a warehouse. People are bringing you their stuff for like excess. Okay. And then you're just collecting money by the day and making sure you move material around correctly. That's all I would do.
Wow. So like warehousing for like an Amazon, or warehousing for just anybody who wants to store anything.
Anybody that stores anything. I mean, you don't even necessarily need trucking, but you could have like some kind of hot shot flatbeds, but to just own a warehouse, I mean, it's like low overhead. I mean, it's really just accounting,
right?
Like a management system and some, forklift drivers and some racking. Be an easy business for me to understand and get into. I would do that potentially, or obviously like car washes are easy.
You're like an entrepreneur, I think, in your gut.
No, not at all. I wish I could be. I just don't have the ideas, and I don't really have a widget. I think I'm like I think that I'm the kind of employee that will raise your floor. Like I'm not gonna come in here and create a business for you, revolutionize it, but I will make it better. I'll show up every day. I'll work hard. I'll be engaged, and I mean, I'll take a business that was running here and move it up here. But I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna sit here and say that I'm like serial entrepreneur or something. I'm not like Mark Cuban or something like that.
Listen, not a lot of us are.
No, that guy's
we want to be like that, but that's why there's one of them and one Zuckerberg and everything else. But
I don't even think I want to be like. People always ask like, well, what kind of level of success do you want to have? And I'm like, man, if I could confidently go through the Chipotle line, and when they ask you if you want extra chicken, you say yes, and you don't have to check your bank account or even think about what the monetary consequences of that are. That's the kind of success I want to have.
Well, and the fact that, like you said, you're where your career is going is focused on that, and you've got such great, and I mean this, great insight and really great advice for anybody listening, but particularly younger generation folks who I hope find this podcast and listen to you are inspired by you, because you're truly, you can see why you're on these young leadership councils. Because charismatic, there's magnetism there, but you're saying the right things in the right way that I think people resonate to, particularly youth looking for leaders who, I would agree with you, a bit in short supply. Whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I think as a general statement, I just try to align with like people who are much, much smarter than me and have more experience than me. So like to get to work with that supply chain guy we've got and our leadership team is like really a blessing. Like our CEO is a rock star. I mean, he's built up and sold like numerous businesses, and even just getting to talk to him, I'm gleaming so much information. And to get to work at LFM with all these like MIT, Stanford, like we just they hired a guy who he started his career as an electrician in Australia and subsequently went to Harvard and got his MBA, and now he works with us. And I just spent an hour on the phone with that guy. And I'm like, is this really my life? Do I actually get to work with these people? I pinch myself every day and try to count my blessings, because I'm like, I don't know how I got on this team, but like, gosh, I'm happy to be here.
Joey, you are a cool cat. You are a cool cat.
I appreciate it. But if I was going to give advice to anybody, I would say that I'm certainly not a finished product by any means, nor am I like a perfect human. And this has been done through like a lot of just failure, like showing up and just failing a lot every day, but trying not to make the same mistakes tomorrow. It's like, there's a bunch of books about it, right? It's like, oh man, I can't remember the guy. But it's like if you just get like 1% better every day, then you're better off. And like Angela Duckworth's book, Grit, is another one that I tend to lean on a lot, where it's like the greatest measure or the greatest predictor of somebody's success is their willingness to get back up again and just be gritty. Just to keep at it and keep showing up, and then eventually you just get better.
Keep trying.
Yeah. I mean, if you just keep showing up, it's kind of hard to fail,
Joey, I'm gonna leave it right there, because that is a great way to conclude our conversation, at least for today.
Okay.
I think this has been absolutely far more fascinating and interesting than even I imagined it would be. You are an incredibly interesting young man. I mean, I forget young man. I keep saying that. Yeah, everybody look at the beard. See how old I look? You're a fascinating guy.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, and I was kind of worried about being on here. I'd only worked in metals for like 2 years. So, I mean, I know what I know, but I'm not going to pretend like I'm an expert. I mean, even at that business,
you don't sound like you've been in it for 2 years. You sound like you're a veteran. The way you converse here and the things you said, anybody could listen and they probably wouldn't even know that they think you've been in it your literally your whole life.
It's a lot of being around smart people and reading a lot.
Oh, I think some of that's you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, even when I was at Loftus, we had a guy we had acquired his business. His dad had started it, and he'd worked there since he was a kid. So he'd been in metals, like kind of tool steel, for like over 40 years, and I got to sit next to that guy.
Oh man.
Like I always said I worked in sales at Loftus, but I just put my desk in the sales, like the internal sales place, so I could learn from them and be around that guy.
Just listen.
Yeah, I mean, you got to claim it from the source, right?
I'm telling you, whatever company ends up with you is going to be damn lucky. That's as far as I'm concerned. And I'm not BSing. That's anybody listening can hear that.
Oh, I appreciate it. I'm just happy to be a part of it.
Well, I'm glad. Listen, thank you again hugely for agreeing to take some time, share some insights, share some real inspiration, share some stories, and we'll look forward to seeing what the heck happens to you in the future, for real.
Well, absolutely. I appreciate it. And if there's anyone I can connect you with, you let me know, or any way I can help. I think some of the people that I did work at Loftus, I think would be really, really good on here. Well, I listen. My goal on this podcast, obviously, is to create an environment that people want to come on and talk about their own stories in business, but also that people want to listen to and get something from, so that when they're out driving or walking the dog or whatever it is they're doing, they listen and they go, this was a good use of my block of time, and I learned something, and I got something that I didn't have before. And that's all I'm trying to do. So hopefully I provided a platform, and God knows you delivered, man. Well done. Well, fingers crossed.
So I'm gonna end this, but don't you go away.
Okay.
And ladies and gentlemen, that is our show for today. Do check us out on whatever your favorite podcast platform is. Check us out on YouTube. And if you're interested in potentially being on the show, find me, text me, email me, and this is what the experience is like. So thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next one.